Hello, everybody. Hello. You all know how excited I have been for this Facebook Live interview with Leah Lund. I have to tell you, being excited is an understatement. I'm so looking forward to this chat. And you know, hormones are kind of my thing, hormones my gig, but brain health and just optimizing the brain is such a huge thing for me. I know that working with clients, sometimes 12 hours a day, you have to be switched on, you have to be sharp. So anything that I can learn from these experts on brain health and Leah herself is just fantastic. So I'm excited for this one. Leah is founder of One Health and also the creator of the Brain Health Summit, which we're going to talk about at the end, which is launching on the 28th of April, and you can sign up for it. It's a free summit with over 30 experts. But first of all, welcome, Leah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Naomi, and hello to everybody in your tribe and community. I'm so excited to collaborate with you, and you know, hormones and brain health are so intertwined that you really can't have one without the other. So it's a perfect partnership.
Yeah, it's a big one, and it's one. And as I was saying to you when we first got on the call just now, it's actually gained a lot of interest. I had emails coming out of the woodwork from people asking about all sorts of spectrums, from a grandmother who wanted to keep up with her 6-year-old to someone with multiple chemical sensitivities, a lady with PCOS and depression, and then a pilot in Hong Kong who wanted to understand how they could optimize the pilot's brain. So it's big, and I think a lot of people are realizing that they can, through techniques, optimize their brains. So first of all, I'd love to know why this aspect of health? What brought you here?
Yeah. So for me, it was, I really felt like there was something going on in my head, whether that be real or imaginary, at a very young age. And what I mean by that is I felt tremendous anxiety and really what you could call depression. It was never diagnosed, but at 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, like I remember having very dark and deep thoughts. And I look at pictures and I see myself at 6 months old. I've got a great picture where I'm like smiley, happy baby with a little curl on top of her head. And then beginning about kindergarten, you don't see a smile on my face, hardly ever in any of the photo albums, you know, for the rest of elementary school and even into university. And, you know, I really thought, because oftentimes these are traits that are inherited. So I thought, in a condensed way, I just thought something was wrong. Maybe I was crazy. We had my grandmother we called a little crazy, you know, so you start to wonder, well, what is going on? For me, the biggest piece of the brain health that it turned out to be was neurotransmitter depletion, which, and the first time, and I was into my 30s when I heard the term nutritional psychology, and I went, well, what? You know, this has something to do with my food, and this is something that can be fixed. It's not just my personality and who I am. It was such a tremendous relief. And so I had already crashed and burned from a corporate career of a different kind because of how I felt inside my head and because of the stress that I was internalizing and how that was affecting my adrenals and, of course, hormones. And so it was a natural kind of pause point for me. And then I took off on going back to school and studying this and learning more about it. And once you know, I think you just can't help but want to share that and make it more mainstream knowledge.
Wow, that's such a long. So what happened in between that period of when you started having these dark thoughts and these moods? I mean, were your parents looking for alternatives, or did you just live with it thinking that was normal?
I just lived with it thinking it was my personality and thinking it was just the kind of people we were as a family, meaning very introverted, very in our head, my mother was very anxious and nervous. I know now that she had low serotonin, and that contributed to my being born with low serotonin, but she had no clue that that's what it was. I hadn't, you know, growing up, I didn't have a clue. So yeah, I actually tolerated it, but more so even faked it, you know, fake it till you make it. I went into a career that was in the fashion industry, and it was very fast paced. It was the worst possible place I could have ended up in some regards, because it was all about sales performance and things like that. And it was very fast moving. And I faked it on the outside, and it took more and more of a toll all along on the inside, till one day I really did hit a point where I ended my career. I turned in my resignation.
Mm-hmm.
I ended a 13-year relationship because I didn't know if maybe that was part of it or what was happening. And I cashed out a 401k, a retirement plan to live on, because I really didn't know what I was going to do. And I went and searched, and I wondered, is it my hormones? Because it did seem to get a little aggravated at that time. I went to so many different experts on so many different things. And what I like to share with my clients is what took me about 6 years to even start to put the pieces together. I feel like could have been about a 2-week process to start with the brain chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is so foundational, and it affects everything else. But, looking back, I have no regrets, because obviously I ended up where I am doing what I do, and I love it. And so,
Wow. It must have been, and just that shift from thinking that it's just you, it's your personality, and you're always going to feel like that I would love to, that moment when you realize, you had a couple of days where you had that just joy, instead of going into those moods and realizing, oh wow, there's something I can do. I mean, that must have been so profound.
It was immensely profound, and it was just like such a heavy weight was lifted off, because in those 6 years of sort of figuring things out, I also started to do a lot of spiritual study, and I really was understanding and believing how our thoughts create things. And so I was really putting a lot of effort into positive thinking and setting intention and all of those things that do work. It's just really hard for them to work when you're depleted in your basic neurotransmitters like serotonin and GABA and others. And so the almost guilt of that too, when these things that you see working for everybody else and that sound really good intellectually, just I think adds to it and made me feel even worse. And so then the knowledge that, oh, this is about nutrition, and this can be restored, and this can be repaired. It was life-changing. Doesn't even do it justice. Like, it was just such a freedom. I couldn't believe that after all that time, it really was something that could be solved.
It's interesting you touch on that. One things that I do see a bit, I see especially with all this trend with affirmations and positive thought, I see people getting on the path of that, and they're on a high for a while. It kind of keeps them going for a while, and then there's this sudden crash because they haven't dealt with maybe any of the underlying issues that are going on. With serotonin, neurotransmitters. So that's interesting that it can hold you for some period of time, but then you've got to do a little bit more.
Yeah. And the bottom line, my view on things. So that was the start. And then I went back to school. I became a holistic health coach. I studied neuronutrition. I'm also a hypnotherapist now. And so over the years of study, and then eventually with my clients, I developed what I call the brain makeover method. And the reason I bring that up right now is that I want to be clear that it's not just one thing. So is neuronutrition absolutely powerful in its ability to restore how you feel? Absolutely. But I wouldn't choose between that and supporting your hormones, for example, right? They're both really important. I also wouldn't choose that and then never do the mindset work or the affirmations or have a spiritual connection, because we're multifaceted. So in the brain makeover method, we start with changing the brain, but then we engage the body, then we learn to manage emotion, master mindset, and take soul aligned action, because I think it really takes all of those things to have not only good health and feel good, but have a fulfilling life, have an enthusiasm about your life.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that whole approach. So one of the things that that I get asked about a lot, and it's one of these things that I'm seeing come up a lot, especially with chemicals, mold illness, Lyme, all of these chronic illnesses that are obviously causing inflammation. And one of the biggest areas it affects is the mood, brain, from things like anxiety, depression, or fogginess. Is that something that, can you come back from that in terms of, are there things that you can do to really support brain health? And is it just about nutrition, or is it the other areas as well?
So it's really fascinating that it is the multiple areas. And so in our series is called Reboot Your Brain. And Naomi, we're so excited to have you featured in that series as well. The thing that comes across loud and clear, so we've got experts on chronic fatigue, experts on fibromyalgia, experts on autoimmune disease, and every single one of them, if I had to pick foundational pieces that keep coming up, yes, nutrition is one.
Mm-hmm.
Detoxification is one, and inflammation, reducing inflammation, everything that you can do to reduce the silent inflammation, the internal inflammation, and of course, if it's developed into something like arthritis, it applies as well. And then also emotional health. And there's a huge body of research that I'm sure you're familiar with about attachment trauma. So trauma that may have even happened at 1 year old or earlier that might not look like the capital T traumas that you may think of when you think of the word trauma, but they're subtle things that happen at a very early age that are stored in our cellular memory and in our processing as a rejection or a separation or an isolation, a baby that has to be put into the intensive care and separated from its mother. These things make a difference. And there's more and more evidence to show that sometimes those kinds of experiences in early childhood actually make you particularly vulnerable to the more autoimmune, especially type diseases like chronic fatigue and things like that. So yes, nutrition, yes, reducing inflammation, reducing or improving your detoxification, which I have to throw out there that for the brain, when and how the brain detoxes is through, just like the body has the lymph system, the brain has glymph. They call it the glymphatic system, and that only happens when you sleep. So there's even one expert in our series that says, I won't even give out supplements until I know that somebody's committed to good sleep habits.
Love it. That's fantastic. Yes.
Yeah. So, it is full circle. And then stress and adrenals come up all the time as well. And, but we have such great stories. I think not unlike you, almost everybody that has come into participate in this series had a personal journey that included some kind of health issue that led them to do the work that they do. And whether it be the doctors and coaches and experts themselves, or whether it be a patient or client, we have stories and evidence and proof and examples of reversing menopause. A woman that reversed menopause, she went into early menopause at 38, reversed it, and had a child at 41. We have a woman who had severe signs of dementia at age 50 and reversed that. She's now back doing Alzheimer's research, and I could hardly keep up with all her facts and knowledge. So her brain. Wow.
I'm just writing notes so I can.
Yeah, exactly. And we have the mother of a young man who at age 5 was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and he's now 16. He's been downgraded to ADD. And he's actually written more than one book and teaches about autism now. So, he's functioning. So, yes, this can all change is really, the message in all of that. And nutrition matters, sleep matters, stress matters, and our environment and toxins matter, and also our emotions and, what we think about our life and ourselves and our childhood experiences.
Wow. So you've got so the guests on the summit, are these stories from the guests, the yes. menopause reversing dementia at 50, menopause at 38, and then the 5-year-old who's now was diagnosed with autism. Oh, wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Yeah, what was one of the most surprising things? What was one of the most kind of surprise? What was something that you learned about the brain or brain health that you didn't know that was actually quite was there something?
I would say that the area of leaky brain, I don't know. I mean, I certainly knew leaky brain exists just like leaky gut exists. But the detail that's happening now in actually seeing where tears are happening in the brain from toxin, whether that toxin comes from what I call non-foods, but things we think are foods. So we eat them, but they're non-foods, that it literally is tearing up the tissues in the brain. The description, you may be familiar with the American doctor, Tom O'Brien. He goes into, like, he pulls up the slides and everything to show all the research and all the technical details of how that's occurring in the brain. And that was pretty fascinating for me. And then a lot of just the interrelatedness. I was actually, from a surprise standpoint, I was a little surprised with how many of our experts mentioned the spiritual side to things, because that, wasn't necessarily their area of expertise or what they're known for. And yet it came up quite often in their healing stories that was a piece of it for them too, that, they really had to connect with and start to communicate with higher power, however they define that, and bring that aspect of their life into the picture of healing as well. So that was a little surprising too, to be honest.
Yeah, look, I think you find that from practitioners that have been working in the area for such a long time. We all start off sort of gung-ho in one particular area, and then we realize as we've been working for a while that we need to include that for that complete healing and that whole healing.
Yes.
It comes later on, I think.
Yes. One of the experts used the term, and I don't know if this will translate. I don't know if this game made it outside of the US, but when I was young, there was a game called Whack-A-Mole, and it was like these little moles that would pop up in a board and you would smack them down. Are you familiar? Or is that...
I know the one. I know. Yeah.
But one of the experts used that example, that if you don't have the holistic healing of any situation, then you're going to, have migraines over here, and you get rid of your migraines, and then chronic fatigue will come up over here, and then, a food allergy will come up over here, and things will keep popping up. I think if you don't go to the deepest levels, which does include the spiritual, certainly the emotional side, and then the spiritual too. So I thought that was a great visual.
I'm super excited to listen to this. This is one of the summits. I can't wait to listen to all the interviews. I'm truly excited.
Well, I'm very excited. This is our 4th year of doing Reboot Your Brain, and we made this year specifically the women's edition. So we also talk about how women's brains are different. Obviously, we have you there to help us understand hormones, which is such a big area. And so I think it's going to be a great event. We're a little bit under 2 weeks away from day one. Obviously, registration's open, and I'll be there to really engage with the audience as well. We'll be doing Facebook Lives in our Facebook group to really help everybody listening utilize the information, because anything can be a stress, right? Like even learning good things for your health and things that will help you can be stressful if it feels overwhelming. And so I really like to put things into teeny tiny steps and bite-sized priorities so that it feels easy and it doesn't stress the system out even more, because that defeats the purpose.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. I think the Facebook page is a wonderful add-on. Just gives everyone a chance to debrief and
exactly
action on what they have learned. So we had a couple of questions. There was a couple of cute. There was a nice question from a grandmother who I sent through, who wanted to know how to keep up with her 6-year-old grandchild. I mean, is that just about brain training? Do you think, can you just do brain training to keep the brain young, or are there particular nutrients you would say that as you age, you definitely should be incorporating?
Well, definitely from a nutritional standpoint, the 2 things that the brain needs that I see most often, especially for women, and sometimes women as we age, because sometimes appetite goes down, which it shouldn't, but I see that happen a lot. Proteins and fats, those are really nutrient dense types of foods for the brain. So proteins, including the animal proteins to be able to get the complete proteins, and then fat, satisfying saturated fat. And in fact, in our recovery and our brain recovery programs using to restore the serotonin levels and everything we were talking about earlier, we recommend a 45% distribution of fat during at least during that time, and then maybe slow down on it a little. So it's amazing when you do something as simple as with your morning, whether it's a tea, if it's a coffee, we'll work over to tea, but with your morning tea, adding coconut oil, adding grass-fed non-salted butter, so Irish Kerrygold butter or something like that. Just even try that as an experiment, even if you don't believe it's going to make a difference. Like, just try it as an experiment and try the morning you have your grandchild, and have that in the morning with that extra fat for you that is a slow burning, sustaining energy, and see what a difference it can make. Getting to bed, getting good sleep. I mentioned that. I call sleep a nutrient. So we need a minimum of 6 hours for even that glimpse system to work, but even for the blood flow that helps everything else in the cognitive function area of our brain, 6 hours is a minimum. Anything less than that, and I compare it to when you sit on your foot wrong or something, or your leg, and don't get blood flow and your leg goes to sleep. That's what's happening up here if you're not having 6 hours. And then downtime too. I really think that we feel older and more fatigued when we feel like our mind is full and our brain never gets a rest. And so making sure that even with the caregiving, and I fully understand, I'm a grandmother also, I know how fun it can be, but making sure that you have rest and recovery time around that, because the brain needs rest too. It needs time that is just neutral and not stimulating and not taking in new information. And so I'm a big believer and teacher of what I call sunrise rituals and sunset rituals. Start the day in solitude for yourself, journaling, meditating, reflective time. End the day quiet again. Don't expect the nervous system. Everybody's nervous system, this comes out a lot in the series too, everyone has a different sort of stress set point or stress toleration point, depending on your individual nervous system. So learn what that is. And if yours happens to be a nervous system that gets worked up easily, then you need to very proactively do things throughout the day to calm your nervous system down. I teach breathe breaks, which is every 90 minutes. Just take a pause, stop what you're doing. Maybe you meditate, maybe you take a deep breath, maybe you just put on some music that makes you feel good, but give your brain that rest time. Can be really, really restorative and help you keep up. And no, I don't know how old your grandson is, but no, your 10-year-old doesn't feel like they need a breathe break, right? But
they don't need it, yeah.
But we do. So yes. Taking that time for yourself, and also mealtime. You know, the nervous system, the rest and digest system of our nervous system is the parasympathetic, and it's literally even called that, rest and digest. That means we should be relaxed and calm when we're eating. So if you're eating on the go and eating on the run, your body's in stress mode. It's not going to be absorbing the nutrient in the same way. So all those little things add up, and they all matter, and they all can make a big, big difference in energy and stamina.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. I with the fat, I noticed, so until 2013, I was a vegetarian vegan, and I'd been a vegetarian vegan since I was 8 years old, so it had been a long time. And in 2013, I introduced bulletproof coffee. And I just remember that first week of having that high coconut MCT oil in my coffee. I think at the time it was just coconut oil. But I just remember it was like parts of my brain lit up that I just had never felt before. It was amazing. They just lit up, and I thought, wow, this is what it feels like to be alive. I remember that so clearly. Yes.
And it's a sustainable, I don't know how else to describe it. It's very grounding, because it's like, wow, I don't even have to try to have energy. I just have it. Like it's there at a very grounded level. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think those will be helpful, and definitely the rest to digest and the meditate, sort of the downtime at the beginning and the end of the day. What about tiring people? What about people that, is there a way of kind of protecting the brain against people that are really draining?
Great question. Yes. And that's a really important question because, again, that conversation of our stress response, whatever we think is stressful will be stressful. Our body will respond in that way. The brain is really equal opportunity as far as stresses. So it could be that a car is swerving over into your lane on the freeway, or it could be somebody saying something you don't like, and it's really having the same effect inside of your head. And so proactively for yourself, learning not to take on other people's energy is really important. Something that I teach my clients is, because you're not going to change that energy, right? Very rarely will you change how somebody else operates. So all you can change is how you respond to it. And my suggestion is to imagine that energy, like even if you want to give it a color, and usually inevitably someone will say, like black or something dark and aggressive, or maybe red sometimes if it's really angry. But just let that energy, instead of fighting against it, let it pass through you. Let it pass all the way. Like, acknowledge that it's there. It's how they're choosing to be. That doesn't mean it has to change your internal environment. So just allow the energy, even visualize it in your mind while you're talking to them, that it's just going right through you. And instead of fighting against it. Deep breaths, of course, can make a difference. And really recognizing what it is you're thinking about what they're saying, or doing. Because it's usually not, our stress response isn't about the actual event or circumstance that's happening outside. It's about what, maybe even very subconsciously, but what we're thinking and believing about what happens. So not personalizing is another way to say that. How they're acting, whatever is happening, reminding yourself, okay, that has nothing to do with me. That's their opinion. That doesn't mean a thing about me. That's just what they believe. I believe this. Doing any kind of pause and self-talk around that is really helpful too.
That's really helpful, and I think we discussed this earlier, and I think I sent you an email that one of the questions was someone asking about how do I deal with toxic people, and I said, in terms of that word itself, when you say that, that brings up that perception of the negative connotation of that person, and that probably just heightens it all. So even getting away from phrases like that, and it's quite fashionable at the moment to call people toxic, but it's not the best way to phrase it, because then, like you say, we're then telling our brain, okay, this person's toxic, then it's going to hear that and deal with it as though that's correct. Yeah.
And the mind, something from the hypnotherapy part of my work. So I do rapid transformational therapy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, from Marissa Peer. I studied with her to learn rapid transformational therapy. And there we really understand that the mind always is going to do what it thinks you want it to do. So if you're telling the mind that somebody's a toxic person, the mind is going to kick and scream and do everything it can do to move you away from what it is viewing is dangerous, into a position of safety. But the bigger thing, how I think of it, we use these terms brain and mind, interchangeably all the time. I look at the brain as just a mechanism. A brain takes an input and it puts an output, and it's almost like a mechanical in that way. It's a mechanism. The mind is directing the brain. Mm-hmm. The mind tells the brain if it's something to fear or not. But you, as the higher power, body, mind, spirit entity, can direct or lead the mind. So letting your mind know by your word choice that it doesn't have to be fearful of this person. It doesn't have to tell the brain to, go into stress mode, fight or flight or freeze. You can really help those situations not affect you when you do that. So that's a great example, Naomi, of don't even use that word, because whatever you say, your mind will believe you.
Yes, I think that's absolutely, that's really good. Really good information. So, and it's exactly the same as when you're dealing with that stressful situation. I think you can see the difference between how people are reacting and how some people just kind of can absorb it, let it go past, and it doesn't have to be a huge issue that puts you straight into that sympathetic nervous system and brain inflammation.
Correct.
Okay, well, as we're wrapping up, what I would love to know from you, knowing your history in terms of neurotransmitters and serotonin, what are the couple of things that are non-negotiable for you, whether it's lifestyle, diet, what are a couple of things you notice you have to do or not do on a daily basis that keep your serotonin in an optimal balance?
Yeah. So absolutely, I go back to sleep. For me, that is completely non-negotiable. And that means that by 8 o'clock, I'm unplugged. By 8 o'clock, I'm unplugged, because then I can downshift. And I do get up early, but then I can downshift. And by 9, most nights by 9, I'm actually in the bed and I fall asleep. I'm kind of a champion sleeper, so I fall asleep pretty easy. And then I get up early, but it doesn't feel like a chore. I want to get up early and I'm productive at that time. So sleep is huge. Food, I've mentioned nutrition and protein in particular, but I didn't specify about breakfast. Breakfast within the hour of getting up is so important. And it actually, almost every time that I have a client who hasn't been eating breakfast and we start her eating a high protein breakfast, even the ones where their goal is to lose weight, they will lose weight, even though that's more food maybe and more calories than they've been eating before. The combination of nutrient dense calorie plus doing it early in the day to turn on the metabolism, they start losing weight. They never can believe it, but they start losing weight. So that breakfast right away. And people will often ask, well, what do you eat for breakfast? How do you get enough protein? And my favorite breakfast is dinner. So make enough at dinner. Yeah. So if that looks like a steak and a salad,
You're the same.
My breakfast, why not? And I actually think other countries than the U.S. are better about like salads, especially for breakfast. U.S. is very cereal, bagel, those certain things, waffle, are acceptable for breakfast. But no, breakfast is really the most important meal. So having that larger breakfast and that larger protein. And then aside from that, for me, non-negotiable is this isn't really a daily, but I think it's a point worth making. I call it vitamin Leah. So vitamin Naomi, which is solitude time. Yes. And so I take, for example, once a month, I take an evening. Usually it starts somewhere whenever I'm done with work for the day and into the evening. And I go away and stay somewhere for the night all by myself, go to a hotel, go to a spa, go to something like that. And not just for a couple hours, but literally for that night, until the morning. And I'm away from everything. I take a journal. I take an actual book. I try not to even turn the TV on or music on in the room that I'm in. And it's really just solitude time with myself. And it is so nourishing. And so few women especially ever do that. There's always somebody else there putting stimulation into the nervous system of some kind, and it's not saying I have a wonderful husband, I love my life, I love my family. I'm not running away and hiding, but I'm taking that quiet downtime that's just for me with absolutely no agenda, nothing that I have to do, to be able to reconnect with myself and sense what I want to do. And think about that. How often do we have a wide enough open schedule to go with what our body is feeling is the right thing to do at the time and to sense what we do? Unless you wipe the slate clean, that doesn't really happen very often. So make it happen. Schedule, you could consider it or call it a date with yourself. But I call it vitamin Leah.
I love that idea. I know that I need alone time quite frequently. I get energy from people, but then also I get tired from people. If I'm at a dinner party, I'm good for a couple of hours, and then after 2 hours, I'm tired. Yeah. I need to reset.
Yeah, so you can have I'm that way too. You can have little pockets of it throughout the day, and then to take it to a whole nother level, do that little day trip by yourself or overnight. The reason I like overnight is because you'll hit a point where you stop thinking about what the next thing is. Like it's just, you're so removed and checked out that you relax on a whole different level. And if this isn't too much information, which it probably is, like it even changes my bowel movements. Like that level of relaxation are always more frequent. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable the difference between being in a stressed state of mind versus relaxation, what it does to the digestive system.
Completely. And again, I wouldn't call my days that stressful, So if you're feeling like your days are, then you probably would have an even bigger effect.
Yeah.
From vitamin U.
I absolutely love those ideas. Sleep, I know it's a huge one. I know I feel it. Breakfast. I mean, just quickly in terms of having breakfast up within the hour, anyone, I mean, is there any of the guests on the Brain Summit talk about fasting and that type of thing as well? Did that come up? Because that would be a little bit different.
Yes, it did come up from a couple of different people, and whether it's keto green, which might be a concept new to some people, or just fasting in general. And there is a lot of clinical experience and research to show for women in particular to have 12 hours of not eating. Okay. And yet I find that we can still do that from say 6 to 6, and so for myself personally, and again, I tend to work with especially people that are depleted in their neurotransmitter. One of the ways women get so depleted in their neurotransmitter is calorie restriction. And so when I hear fasting, I'm delicate and careful about how I put that into play depending on the individual, because between blood sugar issues and neurotransmitter issues, I definitely want to make sure we're not talking about a calorie restriction. So 6 to 6, great. You could still get up at 6, by 7 or so, have your breakfast.
That's great advice. I agree with you on this. I think getting things balanced and having your meals, and then once you're feeling better and things are more balanced, if you want to experiment, it's good. But yeah, if there's anything out with hormones and neurotransmitters, it can worsen it for some people.
Yeah. And some, not all keto diets or intermittent fasting are created the same, but some get down to recommending like 800 calories in a day. Well, Nazi concentration camps fed 900. So, we don't want to starve ourselves.
We need, we do need that food in terms of, especially women. I think women do. We need that for our nervous systems, neurotransmitters, hormones, and brain health. This has been absolutely fantastic. I'm already learning a lot, and I can't wait. I know there were so many other questions that came up, and I know that they'll probably be answered in the Brain Health Summit. Is there someone talking about habits? Rewiring the brain in terms of bad habits. Will there be somebody on chatting about that?
Yes, there's more than one that comes up quite a bit. That will definitely be a topic of some of our Facebook Lives too, because any habit, anything new that you want to even learn, it comes down to the knowledge and information, but then you have to put in the effort, right? So a supplement doesn't work in the cupboard. Your workout routine doesn't work if you're on the couch. You have to put in the effort. Then it really becomes a matter of practice. And the more you practice, you are changing the way neurons are communicating with each other and forming that neural pathway. So this is neuroplasticity that we hear about, or you hear that term. And yes, several people touch on that.
Good. It's effort. Yeah, it's effort. Yeah. I'm trying to do the meditation every morning, and I have to do it every morning. Not drinking at the weekend. I used to have a glass of wine at the weekend, and it was just habit to have a glass of wine on Fridays. And it took me a good 3 weeks to knock that habit. Even though it was just one, I just wanted to get rid of it. And it's a bit of effort, but once you get there, your mind goes along with you.
Exactly. Once it knows it's safe. and familiar. Once it becomes more familiar, because to the brain, unfamiliar equals, or to the mind, unsafe too. So once you make it routine enough,
it will be happy and go with you. Yes, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. So I popped the link in. So I want to let people know the Brain Summit, the Brain Health Summit is it's free. You can sign up. It kicks off on the 28th of April. And they'll have access to 2 interviews a day over the course of the summit. That's right. And then if they do want to watch or start watching it now, they can purchase the package.
Correct. And I just want to do a correction to make sure everybody sees it. It's Reboot Your Brain is the actual name of it. Yeah, that's okay. And yes, there is a sales package. There's a really incredible 50% off on that up until when we start. And day 1 is the 29th here. Yeah, so through midnight 28th. Yeah. And Naomi, thank you so much, not only for this, but for being an incredible expert within the show, because your interview is really powerful for helping women understand some of the things that you also can, just like your brain chemistry can feel like, well, that's just how it has to be. Thanks to you, women are going to know, no, that isn't just how it has to be at all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. And I can't wait to watch the series. And if everyone wants to, they can sign up for the Reboot Your Brain at Summit, and they can also find you at One Health.
One Whole Health. Yeah.
One Health Whole Health Facebook page and website. I'll put the links up for them.
Okay. Perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.